Finally, All Saints Online has come back to the potosphere. Yes, I'm fully aware that that's not a real word, but I like it anyways. So, just go with it. I know it's been way too long since we've released a new episode, but during this time, we've been working on new interviews and streamlining our editing so we can release a new episode of the All Saints Online podcast every other Friday. So we hope that you continue on this journey with us and that you enjoy these episodes. Also, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That helps us out in building our community where all means all. One other announcement before we get into today's episode is we have added a new host. I'm pausing so you can clap and cheer. Okay? But also, if you were like, oh, don't worry, I'm still gonna be here. You're still gonna hear from me. All right, but we've added a new host, Sarah. You will hear episodes where it's Sarah and I. You will hear episodes where it's just me, Chris, and the guest. You will hear episodes with just Sarah and the guest. Today is the perfect introduction to Sarah because it is a solo episode with her and our guest. Our guest today is Christi Leupold, who is not only the communications coordinator at St. Andrew's United Methodist Church in Omaha, Nebraska, but she's also a mom, a business owner, a graphic designer, an artist, a school PTA president, an Anglophile, which is somebody who admires British culture. I didn't know what that was. I had to look it up. But anyways, we hope that you enjoyed this conversation talking about how do you market the church.
Hello, my name is Christi Leupold, and I am the communications coordinator extraordinaire at St. Andrew's United Methodist Church. I added the extraordinaire.
It's on her business cards as well.
It might be in pen. Ignore that part.
She writes it in later before she hands it to somebody. All right. So full disclosure, Christi and I are friends, and this giggling will happen throughout. We are just going to dig right into it because we talk on a fairly regular basis. Mm-hmm. We interact socially, but also through a lot of the volunteer things that we do. So I know that we're just going to get into it, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well.
Are you a rule follower?
It's not time yet.
Are you a rule follower?
Mostly. I don't know why that one gets to me, but that's the other thing. Is like certain things get to certain people, and there's no rhyme or reason to it.
So for me, I used to be a rule follower, and I still am. It's like in my instincts. But because I don't like that part of me, I've started pushing back on it. Like,
interesting.
Yeah. Who makes the rules? Who decided?
That there are rules in place?
Yes. Okay. But I like to question why.
Oh, that makes sense.
Like, why is this a rule? That. Who decided this was a rule? Oh, can this rule be broken and everything's going to be just fine?
That's very interesting that you say that because our shared experiences have been through church. That's how you and I met to begin with, right? We've had a few conversations before, but I would love for you to share a little bit about what brought you here to our community. Mm-hmm. And through that, it's often great to get a visual through the audio of who you are, right? And where you came from.
Yeah, I'm just going to start talking and then just shut me up when I need to stop talking.
My favorite thing to do.
It's really hard for us to hold a conversation. So I'm a little bit of a religious nomad. I grew up evangelical, non-denominational, or what they called interdenominational. And I grew up in Omaha. Born and raised. Neither of my parents are from Omaha, though, so I would be what you call first generation. I like to say I'm from Omaha. I'm not from Nebraska.
Interesting.
Please don't get offended, anyone, by that. Because if you ask me about Western Nebraska, I know very little. None of my extended family lives in Nebraska. My dad's from New Jersey and my mom's from Iowa. So I'm from Omaha. I'm not from Nebraska. But anyways, I grew up going to an interdenominational church for the first 22 years of my life. I can't really tell you the exact age I stopped going. I think it was early 20s.
That's interesting, though, because a lot of people, the transition is around the high school, and then you go to college, and it's the college experience that sometimes unintentionally takes you away from the church because you just have so many other things and you're learning how to balance your life.
A lot of people move away from home. I didn't have the experience of moving away for college. I didn't have the traditional college experience. I did stay around and I did keep going to my church of origin, and there was many times where I couldn't imagine my life not at that place. I went to school there in elementary school. My mom was on staff for many years. My dad was an elder. I had been on various worship teams since I was 14 years old, volunteering with the youth group, and then in college I kept being a leader there. And some things transpired that kind of signified my exit, not only from volunteering and ministry, but from the church in general, that specific church. We'll save that whole conversation for the church trauma episode. And then I went to a new church, and then I decided I just needed to not, because the new church had a lot of people that had left the previous church. And so the community was the same, and I needed to just have a break. I needed a minute. And my faith in God never waned. I always had a faith, but I struggled a lot with what the traditional church said was okay and what was not okay. Here's my thing about the rules. Like, why? Why? Why is being gay a sin? Why love the sinner, hate the sin? Why do we have this hard and fast line on pro-life, pro-choice? We're getting controversial over here, but here we go.
Some of that says, why did you make that rule based on what you read in Scripture? And that's where it gets a little bit tricky, is not necessarily why was the Scripture written that way, but why did you interpret it that way, right?
And I was struggling seeing hypocrisy. So yeah, like I said, we could go down this deep hole, but I think that's for a different podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
There was quite a few years where I was nomadic. I wasn't really going to a church, but I never ever lost my faith in God. And my personal relationship with Jesus never went away. I just struggled with what it looked like with what I was feeling. And what I thought was good and what was not. And so I met my husband when we started dating. I had probably not been going to church for a few years. And when we met, he had also not been going to church for a while. And he was raised Lutheran. And so we decided together we wanted to find a church for the two of us, because when we met, we knew pretty quickly this was it for both of us. We were each other's person. I know. Oh, cheesy. But it felt comfortable. Yeah. It felt like Cinderella's slipper. It just fit,
the change of when, because previous relationships, she might have been like,
oh, Lord Almighty.
In it, right? Yeah. And then you're like, oh, wait, no, this is what it's supposed to feel like, right?
Oh, wait, I don't have to feel like crap because you're gaslighting me every 2 seconds.
What's interesting is I think that goes hand in hand with both of our church experiences as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
So when we met, we knew we were endgame. Taylor Swift reference. I have 2 kids that are girls, so I might quote a few Taylor Swift lyrics. We were endgame. So we found a Lutheran church that was a little bit more contemporary for my taste, and then a little bit more traditional for his taste. And I found that coming out of the evangelical world, where there's really no checks and balances, there's no governing authority, there's no one that the senior pastor answers to. I know I went from I want to break all the rules to like I want some kind of structure. I also wanted accountability, because I'd seen how toxic it could be. But so we started going to the Lutheran church together. We got married there. Our girls got baptized there. And then during COVID, some cracks started to show. I was already putting up with some philosophies that I didn't agree with, and I didn't feel comfortable inviting all of my friends to this church.
That makes a huge difference.
And one of the big things was, I know that my kids are going to start figuring out who they are and who they are attracted to, who they are on this journey. I don't want to put them in a box, but also I didn't want some Sunday school teacher to put them in a box either. And I knew that if they expressed anything that they had been expressing to me at home out of curiosity and just general being a kid, figuring out who you're attracted to and not, like on this journey, I knew my responses to them at home, but I couldn't control what their teacher at Sunday school would say.
Right.
If one of my girls said, oh, this girl's cute, I didn't want them correcting her. So that was a huge impetus for me. Oh, this is not safe for my family. We had heard about St. Andrew's, and
I'm curious when you say heard about. Right? I have heard that from quite a few people. So how did you hear about it?
So Jay Shrigley, our worship director here, was the worship director at our old church. It was during the pandemic, so we started watching services online. We're familiar with Jay, and then I start hearing the sermons. And I remember there was one sermon talking about the Bible and how for so many years I hadn't said out loud my feelings about the Bible, where it was written by men. It had been interpreted so many times. We really need to be able to dig in and ask questions about this text.
The permission
to ask the question, not this is God's holy word. You will hold it to the highest of standards and not ask any questions. And for me, I'm like, it was written by men. Yes, it was God inspired.
Of course.
But also through centuries, we've been interpreting it from its original text. This may not be as solid as we would like it to be. It was the first time I'd heard from the pulpit what I've been feeling about Scripture. And that it was totally okay. Like, it blew my mind because I had just never heard it preached like that. And then there was the series about the values. And I've been an LGBTQ ally for many years. In fact, my job that I had for over a decade before coming here, I worked at a law firm and they did a lot of advocacy work. And when I took that job, I was anxious because I thought I would lose a lot of friends. And to be honest, I'm being open about my allyship. And there was a lot of backlash from some people from my past.
Right.
I got a lot of inbox messages from posts of myself at Pride over the years. And it was just very telling that the church really has a long way to go to really confront our biases and question why it is that we think that this is an evil sin and why this is a hill to die on as well. So yeah, we started listening to sermons online, and then we came to an end of summer party, and because my kids were young and they were worried about changing churches from the church that they knew and they got baptized at, and so that was nice for them to transition, but now they're totally sold. They love it here.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't hurt that within a year of us starting to watch online and then coming in person, I got a job here.
So before we transition to that, because I have one more question. When you came to that event, so it was a little bit different than a traditional just service and things like that. How did you feel when you walked in the door?
I felt good. The girls felt welcome. It was weird to see people in person that we'd just been watching on screens.
Interesting.
But everyone was welcoming. It was nice to see all types of people. It wasn't one generation or one socioeconomic class, one race. It was a diverse group of people, and my kids fit in right away. And then I got to check in with some of my friends that I hadn't seen in person in a while because it was 2021 and people were still weary wearing masks. And so my kids were a little anxious still. My oldest one has some anxiety stuff, so she wore masks longer than she needed to.
Yes, and
it was a comfort blanket.
Yeah, the children were introduced to that.
She was in kindergarten.
Right, our kids are similar ages, and my middle was in kindergarten at the time, and he just, even to this date, he's in 3rd grade now, and that class of kids is still having some social anxiety issues.
My oldest, she didn't get to finish her kindergarten year, and so still, if she feels uncomfortable, she'll go find the bag of masks that I finally took off the hooks.
Yes, yeah.
It's a comfort blanket for her.
And
my youngest is
for generational,
yeah,
right?
My youngest wasn't even in preschool yet, so she doesn't really remember a lot of it. It's interesting. But
so when we look back at your time with church, you said that there were about 21 years where you were in a very similar environment. But even during that time, you were in roles of leadership. Even as a youth, you gravitated to that. Was there a time after that church, and you said you went to another one for a couple of years, that you were just in the congregation, or have you always been drawn? I'm just curious because that's fascinating to hear, knowing you already and then hearing that part of it.
Yeah, when we started going to Lutheran church, I decided I didn't want to sing on the worship team. I wanted to just go. And
that didn't last long, did it?
No, because people sitting around me would turn around at the end of worship time and go, "You should be up on the platform." And I'm like, ugh.
I do that to people now too.
And
I feel so bad. I was
it's
like, have
okay.
you ever considered choir?
It was finally somebody goes, God gave you that voice to be used. And I was like,
Yep.
oh, okay.
Yes.
I need to get over my stuff. I need to get over my hang-ups, and I need to get back up there. And I've been in various leadership roles, like you said, and different ministries, and mostly in a volunteer capacity over my entire life. I am a leader. That's just in my blood, and it always has been. I can't sit back and not have an opinion and not have an idea of how we can make it better and how I can jump in and help.
I love hearing you say that because I know that about you, obviously, but at the same respect, you're not a dominant personality either. You can be when you need to be, obviously. I can as well. But we also know when it's time to be a part of the team as opposed to leading the team. That is definitely something that I appreciate and value in you.
Aww, stop.
Part of the reason I wanted to point out your leader roles since you were young, I feel that I'm hearing you answering calls, right?
There she goes.
Yes. And that's maybe not even in the moment you realized it, maybe not even a few years later you realized it, but even in your attempts to just be a little bit more passive, which is fine, and I understand that, there is that concept of God's gifts, right? And yes, there is the aspect of, you and I have shared that us singing feels sometimes like a bit of a selfish gift because we enjoy it so much, but then we in turn now know that we enjoy it because God gave it to us and he wants us to use it. You should be able to enjoy the gifts that God gave you. And so when you can see past some of the more obvious ones, such as vocal talent maybe, and start to dig behind the scenes a little bit, I highly suggest that people listen to those callings as well. And I appreciate that you have. So when you were here and you started attending, it was about a year till you had the marketing position because the marketing position needed to be created and
it was created.
For you, obviously,
it was
for it to call you. But even before that, you had stepped into a few other things just to get your foot in. And we're so lucky that our leaders are so involved in even the day-to-day volunteer stuff, right? So if someone chooses to volunteer with something that they consider small, making sandwiches or this or that, our leadership, whether it's the pastors or the people that are in the offices in charge of things, are so a part of all of it. Did you feel that you got a nice, safe glimpse into the organization to feel that you would want to be a part of it?
Yeah, I just think the thing about St. Andrews is it's like what you said earlier. It's like that Cinderella slipper. Once you start, you're just like, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like.
Yeah.
And it felt natural. And it was for both my husband and I. He grew up Lutheran and he had never done anything else.
Oh, my husband was born and raised Catholic.
Yes, so you understand.
Yes.
And for him to be as comfortable with the move here as I was, and maybe even a little bit pushing it more than me, he knew what was good for me. I was being stubborn. I was like, I'm going to fight the fight.
With the trauma that they know that we've experienced, they are trying to be supportive, but they also understand that sometimes you need a little bit more of a push.
Yeah, he's very insightful. My husband is quiet until you get to know him.
Same. Yes.
And then you hear all of his opinions. We really just loved it here. So when I saw the post on Facebook for the job for communications coordinator, I had left a job that I had for nearly 14 years, about 6 months before that. And I was hobbling together some freelance and doing marketing. I had been at a law firm and I was doing everything, not just marketing. And I would say marketing was about 10% of my job, and I wanted it to be 100% of my job. I wanted to drop all the other administrative stuff, HR, accounting. You guys, I can do it. I don't want to. So I really wanted to lean into the marketing and communications and that side of things. So when I left that job, it was a huge life transition. I wasn't married when I started that job. I didn't have kids when I started that job. I was 24. So I had that job for nearly 14 years.
You grew up.
I grew up.
Yeah.
And it was time. Nothing bad happened. There was no drama. When this job came up, I had already been freelancing and hobbling together some work. And I was like, okay, it's part-time. Let's apply. It's in my wheelhouse. It was an interesting transition, but it felt so right because I had all the skills. I had been doing social media and graphic design and newsletter building already. And I walked into people who it wasn't necessarily their job description or their talent or their passion were doing the weekly newsletters and doing social media when they thought about it. And there was no structure. There was no plan. There was no
rhyme or reason even.
No.
It was just other people are doing this, we should too.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And
like we made the event for Easter 2 days before Easter.
Yes.
Those were things that I noticed as just a congregant. I was like, people are looking for these things. We need to be putting it out there. Anyways, as part of the interview process, I came up with, this is a good theme that can help us highlight volunteers. This is a good theme that can make a shareable graphic for the congregation. And if the congregation is sharing our stuff, then more people are seeing our stuff. And we want to make things that our congregation is proud to share and express and interact with. Also subtly get our message out there. Not in your face.
Of course.
We want to be genuinely who we are.
Right.
And like, if you're not genuinely who you are, people can tell.
It's an uncomfortable place to
People do not like fake.
Yeah.
People do not like fronts. People do not like being pandered to. They want genuine, real people who really believe that you are welcome here. And when we say that, we mean it. We're not trying to get you here so we can change you.
Right. Oh, yes. It was very freeing to experience it, right? I was moving past the feeling of this place might be good, this might be okay, even the feeling of comfort when you walk through the doors. And it was liberating to feel safe in a place, and that was very important. Even my time in leadership, I had never been in a leadership role in a church before, mostly because my experience in a church was very different, but I had never experienced the behind the scenes of what goes on in a church, the structure that is needed and required. And that was a humbling experience. It was an eye-opening experience, but it was another safe experience. I trusted the process. I could see behind the scenes that I wasn't being pandered to, and it was more than a feeling. There was the process, the structure in place that backed it up. And even being a part of the values that you were speaking of that drew you here, I was a part of the team that put those together. And even through the entire process, I kept thinking to myself, oh, someone's going to squash this. Someone's not going to let this happen.
There's some progressive stuff we put out there.
Yes. And
stuff that really makes people go, but for those who can't see me because I just made a face of like shaking my head in shock. This isn't a video, Christy. I shook my head in shock. That was my reaction, was like shock, but in a good way.
Right.
Whoa, a church is saying this?
Right.
Like difficult conversations.
Yeah.
I grew up in a place where they said they wanted you to have active discourse, but they didn't really want you to. Don't question me. I know what I'm talking about. And here it's welcome.
Yeah.
Not just the discourse, but then the social justice. That was huge for me. And the all-inclusive. And we just launched this part of our website. We haven't really launched it. It's just on the website. And it's all our welcome section. Okay. There's a section about accessibility where we talk about our handicap spots, our elevator. And then there's a part about parents where there's a cry room and a mother's room and all that. And then we're LGBTQ affirming. And that means we will let you be in any volunteer position or staff position, of course, and we'll do marriages and baptisms. And there's a section where we have our land acknowledgement for the land that we are on, socioeconomic, racial. So we lay it out there even more in this section about all means all. We're not kidding, and we're going to do things to make you feel welcome. So that part is on the website. We haven't highlighted it, but it's on there, and I'm really proud of it. One of the things that I really loved doing was writing our land acknowledgement. So I started in May, and my first Indigenous Peoples Day was that October. And I just do things. At first, I was like asking permission. And I'd be like, Chris, I want to do a land acknowledgement on our Facebook page. Are you okay with that? And she's like, absolutely. So I did that because I felt like that was new. Can I really do that?
Yes.
And then she was okay with it. And then I created a plaque. And there's a land acknowledgement up in our building. And I'm proud of that. Doing subtle and small things to give the signal that this is safe. making our graphics not all white people, making our graphics not all young people, making our graphics not all old people, making our graphics use real people, and representation matters.
Yes.
If you see somebody who looks just like you in the pictures that this church puts out in their marketing, you'll feel welcome because you see yourself there.
And I literally see myself there.
Yes.
Because you've put my family.
But that's some of the things I look for when I create graphics or I create visuals for our marketing and our social media, is making sure that not only we represent who we are, but what we want us to look like.
And if someone walks through the door, this is really what they're going to see. These are individuals that they will see here, the diversity of age, all the things that you talked about and listed before.
For me, how I can show people they're welcome is through subtle changes in some of the text and how we refer to genders or we refer to people in general. Like I said, the graphics, the pictures we use. I'm showing people that you're welcome here. I'm showing people just in subtle ways that this is a welcome place for you. And I love that even though I'm doing the communications and marketing and sometimes Sunday morning announcements, for the most part, I'm behind scenes. I'm not the face. I am not the face of St. Andrews.
Which is exactly what we were talking about, is sometimes even though you are a leader, and as you said, I am a leader. I loved hearing that from you. You also know when it's your time to step back and encourage, as you have done for me a time or two. And I sincerely appreciate it every time that you don't let me get in my head too much about whatever traumas I've experienced before. I will also say that you have taught me a lot about what's okay to put out there. And then Pastor Chris has taught me it's okay not to be comfortable in the traditional way as seeing comfort. I remember being in an admin meeting and her and I were talking about comfortable, uncomfortable. And essentially what it boils down to is it's okay to feel uncomfortable with a topic, with a conversation, so that you can learn to be comfortable in the future about that topic or conversation. I joke around about my platform is I just want everyone to be comfortable. I just want everyone to feel like they're okay.
You're not a taco. You can't make everyone happy.
Oh, not love it. That's the thing, is because I have been so uncomfortable in my life in so many different situations and ways, I never want that for anyone else. Now, there are different ways to be comfortable and uncomfortable. And obviously, I never want the feeling of uncomfortable that I experience, but that's not the same uncomfortable that might happen when you are listening to a sermon series, when you're listening to our amazing pastors and guest speakers share something that you could have chosen not to hear or may have never heard before, or even the humbling times where they're sharing views, opinions that they used to have because they didn't know any better. And now they've changed those views and opinions. What an amazing platform that they have and are using for these purposes.
I've learned a lot from being in a working office, our whole staff. There's some days where it can feel counterintuitive as a productive person to be sitting in a room talking about, I don't know, when John was creating the Case for Inclusion study, there was a lot of talks and long discussions in the office, and it always felt a little unproductive for my little productive self to sit and talk, but it was so good to know why we are coming from this approach and what they're wrestling with, where they came from and what they were taught. And John was really digging into the scripture and wanting to do this class justice. Sometimes when Chris will be doing a sermon, she'll be like, how does this feel? Because she knows I have some triggers.
Yes.
One time she did a sermon on revivals and I was like, I hate that word so much. And she's, oh. And so she'll push it and she'll be like, why? And it's such a good conversation. And Chris said, why does revival trigger you like that? So we talked about it, and she didn't say, oh, it shouldn't trigger you like that. Get over it. That wasn't the approach at all. It was a curiosity. It was wanting to see how a different person would react. And also she was curious because she's, what if other people respond to this?
Right.
Can I work into my sermon? Now I know this word might, and she did incorporate it. I know this word is hard for some people. And it's good to have different opinions to bounce off of to make it feel like a safe space.
Yeah.
So I let Chris know this word could be triggering for some people. I don't know if it was actually a direct result of our conversation. I can dream. But then her saying that, my courage of saying, oh, that word, helped her to say that. So hopefully somebody else's guard went down when she was preaching and they could actually hear what she was saying. And what she was preaching about had nothing to do with the kind of revivals that are hard for me. Late 90s, early 2000s.
But she touched on them too. The history of revivals. And what's also interesting about your example of the word revival is she didn't say, oh, I'm not going to use that word then. Because I know it might be triggering to you. I mean, I know it's triggering to you, so it might be triggering to others. Let me call this something else. No, she went forward with it, but with guidance of, okay, let's rephrase this and still use the word because it can be a powerful word. And the process is a powerful process, and she wants people to experience it in a healthy way.
Yeah. And it can heal some of those triggers, too, when we're willing to talk about it. We're willing to go there. My hope is that everyone that walks in these doors knows it's a safe space to have these conversations because no one's going to ostracize you if you have a different opinion. No one's going to tell you're stupid or dumb for not agreeing with them.
Or ask questions.
Yeah. And I think for me, being at St. Andrews, feeling at home here, getting a job here, the thing that helps me in my position as a communications coordinator is I truly understand our mission and I feel it in my gut.
Yes.
There's some jobs that I've had, even me, with marketing. I can't even tell you some of the businesses I've had to market that I'm just not passionate about. But I think it comes to something like a church. It is so deeply meaningful to people to have someone doing the marketing or the communications that don't buy in and don't get it in their soul. You're missing a lot when it comes to the communications and marketing of a church. Because when you think about marketing, you think about selling things.
Yes.
We're not selling. I will never be the one that's asking for donations or offerings or anything.
Selling or pushing.
Or
even,
pushing.
Right?
And what I am doing is providing an open door and inviting, but also making sure people know we're here.
Yes.
And that this is a place you are invited to. So it's tricky. Marketing our church, it's a hard mix because I am not looking for the bottom line. These are our marketing dollars. What's the return on our investment? We spent this much. How much did we make in revenue because of that ad? Like, what's the math? That's not my goal. My return on investment is we invested this much in this public event. How many people came?
And how do you measure those metrics? I'm just curious. From a standpoint of you have a job to do and the end goal is to invite the people in.
It's very tricky. It's very tricky because you have your statistics.
Yes.
We run an ad on Facebook. We have our statistics of how many people clicked and how many people interacted with that ad. And we can go off of those numbers, yes. But for me, it's the growth of the church. And it's hard to correlate one for one. For a normal business that's selling a product.
Yes.
For those clients, because I do still freelance, guys, this is not my only job, I can do a correlation. Like, I can track the person that clicked on this link on this landing page, converted to a client, and this is how much revenue. Like, I can do that. I can have a CRM system to show me where a client came from, how much money we made off of them. There's their return on investment. Here, it's harder to measure one for one. It's not point A, point B. And honestly, that's okay. And as a marketing professional, you need to be okay with that.
But you've also mentioned that you're process driven. Have you had to learn a little bit or allow yourself the grace to be okay with less metrics?
I do. It's a brain shift because, like I said, I do still do that in other areas of my life. But for me, it's engagement. So we have different weekly series like Motivational Monday, Worship Wednesday, Thankful Thursday, and then I do other things throughout the week. But those are the three themes that we usually do. And Motivational Monday is a quote I take from the sermon the day before. And I think that's a great shareable moment for people who follow our page, and that's something that can get out to your communities. And I try to pick something that's catchy, that will pull somebody in and be like, ooh, what does that mean? For Worship Wednesday, we really highlight different aspects of not just music worship, but like spiritual worship. And I have this series right now I'm doing with staff members and lay members where I ask the question, what does worship mean to you? And these have been reels. So now we're going to get into the technical. Reels on Instagram is where the money is at right now. Okay. Stories have dipped because Meta has changed how stories are showing up for people. And if you are a business page, you show up further down the line, like the ones that show up first, like you click on them and then you get bored and you don't have time to finish the rest of your stories. The ones on the end are businesses usually. They just changed that. It used to be most recent to post or some kind of other algorithm, but business pages are going to the end. So if you've noticed that you haven't seen some of your favorite business pages or influencers on your stories coming up first, interesting, this is why. So reels are where it's at right now because Instagram's competing with TikTok. The church doesn't have a TikTok. All Saints Online has a TikTok. Chris and I have had many discussions about our different approaches to social media because he does All Saints Online and he is building an audience.
Yes.
St. Andrew's is cultivating a culture because we already have an established community. All Saints Online is cultivating their community.
Yes.
That's a better way to put it. What I'm doing is maintaining that community and making it stronger. So he does a whole bunch of other stuff. We have mostly our Instagram and our Facebook, and reels on Instagram are getting more views than even like regular grid posts or stories. I do videos of songs from a Sunday morning. I'll do reels that are clips from worship service. And then there's the interactive piece of asking, what are you incorporating into your Lenten worship series? Or what song is inspiring you these days? So that gets engagement, which helps keep you up on people's feed. So there's engagement, there's capitalizing on the reels, there's capitalizing on shareable pieces, and then there's the information piece. Tuesdays and Fridays, you'll see information because those are the days that I don't have a theme. This event is coming up, or volunteer for this, or things like that.
Something recent that happened that might want to be highlighted or something.
Yeah, so those are more informational, which is part of cultivating a community. But I will say it's really hard balancing congregants' needs and wants on social media, because the more effective way of getting out an event or a volunteer opportunity is in our weekly newsletter. Now, any marketing professional listening, I'm going to blow your mind. Our average open rate for our newsletters is 68%. That is insane.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Okay, good. I was like, wait, please tell me that's good.
I see between 20 and 30 is high for regular businesses. And it's been that high since I started. We send it to about 1,300 individual addresses. Over 900 open it every week. In contrast, our Sunday mornings are about 400 to see those Sunday morning announcements from the pulpit. Everyone wants their event to be an announcement on a Sunday morning. Everyone. And I go, no, I have a whole funnel system of an event comes in and then I organize it. And does it go on social media? Does it go on a Sunday morning announcement? Does it go in the weekly newsletter? Where does it fit? I have a whole organization system, I promise. If you send me something, it gets into the system. But honestly, if you have an event you want people to know about, trust me, when I put it in the newsletter, you're getting prime real estate. And I know
it can be referenced later too, because I find myself reading through it and then later thinking about, oh yeah, that's right. Wait, what was the information? And I will go back to the newsletter before I go to the website.
That's good to know.
Something.
That's
Just
good
an
to know.
FYI, because I'm not gonna lie, I have 3 newsletters now that I get, because
you get the youth and the kids
and Kidmin, yes, and then obviously the weekly one.
That was a gamble splitting those two up again.
I enjoy it though.
Oh, good.
I know who it's for when I'm reading it, right?
And they have different feels. They're different brands. They're different directors. Yeah. Now that we have a really strong family ministry, a youth director, and a Kidmin director, it was imperative to separate those out into two different
Allow
newsletters.
them to have their space too.
And like they have their own feel and culture, and they're creating their own communities with
Definitely.
mini communities, micro communities within the bigger community. And it's good to have, and then it's good that I know all that information so I can know what goes into the main.
Right.
Because sometimes kid stuff comes into the main.
Yeah.
Sometimes youth stuff comes into the main. And I have my reasonings for that.
Of course.
Not everyone understands all my reasoning. Sometimes I don't even understand my reasoning. But
as a parent that has recently transitioned a child from kidmin to youth, because this is his first year in 6th grade.
oh my God.
I know. It's actually been a fairly seamless process because
good.
I'm getting the information I need from each area. I know which events are for this child versus this child, and then what family events there are still communicated in either each of them. Sometimes I see it 3 times, which is great. Like,
then you're like, oh, well, I guess we really have to go to this.
Exactly. So sometimes it's like it catches my eye on sometimes I see them on social. So I think the repetitiveness of it is necessary for what our brains are doing these days.
Yeah.
And I mean, just in general, we're getting a lot of information.
And I try to not oversaturate.
Yes. I was going to say, do you find that as a hindrance or?
It's not for me. I'm good at boundaries.
Okay.
I've done a lot of therapy. Boundaries are like my bread and butter.
Yes.
Anyways, so
You market boundaries.
it's a balancing act because everyone's event that they organize is the top priority for them. And you don't want to diminish that. And you don't want anyone to think that you've been in the newsletter twice. I'm going to pause for a second. And you're not going to be in it for a full month straight. But that doesn't mean your event is any less important.
Of course.
And I firmly believe pauses and then restarts helps people to actually absorb the information. Because if you see something too many times, you stop seeing it. Your eyes start glazing over it. It becomes normal. It becomes part of the background. So if you pull it out and then put it back in a few weeks later, it's more prominent in people's minds. It doesn't become part of the background. And so there's a strategy to it. And it's hard sometimes to let people know there's a reason why it's not in for a month before your event. It'll be in like once to let people know, might take a break, and then it'll be back a couple weeks later. Why isn't it a Sunday morning announcement? Because Sunday morning announcements are for the whole congregation. If you're going for a specific group, I recommend the weekly update. So there's different reasons why I recommend different ways of communicating. Sometimes I don't think people know how thoughtful I actually am about the rhyme and reason. I'm not haphazard, I promise.
No, but
there's a
different
whole
tools.
system.
Yeah, and there are different tools for a reason.
And that's the thing is sometimes there's not always been seamless communication with people organizing events. And there's been some difficult conversations because I've left the impression that I didn't care about an event when the exact opposite was true. And it wasn't brought to my attention until it was too, like it had gotten super emotional for this other person. And I felt terrible because my intentions were never, your event is not important, I don't care about it. My intentions were, I want to effectively communicate this. And I didn't communicate that well enough. They didn't communicate their feelings with me well enough. So it became like a bigger conversation. It all ended well.
Of course.
But as the communications coordinator, I didn't communicate well enough on my intentions. And that was a learning moment for me. And I'm not perfect.
And what's nice to understand the ups and downs of marketing in a church. There are a lot of feelings that are involved. As you said, your feelings are involved because you're so passionate about it. But then when someone else brings you something they're passionate about, their feelings are very involved. And so I think that there's an aspect to that in church marketing that isn't in some of the other things that you market in your life. There's the good and
that's the metrics
yes.
Was this event successful? You can't directly link high registrations for an event to the marketing because there's word of mouth, there's referrals, there's direct asks, which I'm always like, please direct ask people. I can only do so much. Direct asks are the best form of marketing.
Can I just tell you from a direct ask perspective, one of the best compliments I've ever received from friends, even family, is that they know how involved I am with my church, but I'm not pushy. And then they also say I'm not churchy, which isn't a word, but it is what it is, because they're always intrigued by it. They are always excited. The ones that are less likely to go on their own, they tell me they're more likely to come with me. Because they trust what I'm doing and they trust where I'm doing it because of who I am and the things I've said about it. I think that when you are talking about the subtle things that you do with your marketing, sometimes we have to take onus on ourselves a little bit and say, you know what, we can be direct marketers too, right?
It's hard, like how I got here. It was a person that I knew. It's really hard and it takes a brave person, and not all of us are this brave to walk into a church dry, not knowing anybody. So I can give everyone in this congregation, in this community, the tools they need to invite their community. But you got to take that step. And I think that's the thing about a church is I can only do so much. And I'm going to give you all the tools you need, and I'm going to put all the information out there. But we really have to take up our part and invite people. And that's the thing about St. Andrews. It's so easy to invite people here.
So much easier.
There's been churches where I never wanted to invite anyone because I was embarrassed. Can you think back of being embarrassed of a church that you go to every week? To not invite some of the most important people in your life to. And I've never felt that way at St. Andrews. I feel like I can invite anyone all the time. And like trunk or treat, I invited like all of my kids' friends. This is why we're here. We're here because I'm not embarrassed to invite anyone here. And I really hope everyone in our congregation feels the same way. So this is my plea to the whole community to help me do my job. Direct asks and personal referrals and personal requests and, hey, come with me. Go a long way. I'm really hoping to set the digital footprint culture to be, I'm proud of this. I want to share this quote. I want to share this reel. I want to answer this question, even though I know it's going to show up on people's feeds because I answered a question.
Every time I want to share one of those posts or something, especially when it's a reel, I always want to caption it with my pastors are cooler than yours, but
you should.
No, I know. I always am like, no, don't do it. Don't do it.
You can say my communications coordinator is cooler than yours.
No, I mean, when I share it, I say something, but then I'm like, okay, you can't be that bold. But I will say that as we wrap things up here, I want to tie it back to a couple things. You had mentioned that in your previous churches, your allyship was something that you couldn't share. You also mentioned that you were marketing other things. You have other things that you were doing in your life that help fulfill your life. And I know that recently you put on something that you are so proud of, and I am so proud of you for it. And I would love if you just gave a quick recap of what that was. And what it represents for you.
One of the million things I do with my life, because I'm a mom, I have this job, I have freelance, I am the head of our PTA at a school. I know, I do too many things. I also am a co-founder of a nonprofit here in Omaha called Agrabella Orbis, and it's a performing arts nonprofit. And what we do is we utilize storytelling to not only raise money for different nonprofits, but to raise awareness on different issues. We had our biggest event ever. Recently, we partnered with Black and Pink International, who support LGBTQ incarcerated persons and those who are incarcerated who have AIDS. What we did was took stories and letters written directly from inside members who were trans, and we had them performed on a stage by other LGBTQ artists to raise money for Black and Pink. They were raw, unedited stories from trans experiences. Oh my gosh. The courage of the inside members to tell their story, the delicacy and honor that our artists gave to these letters and the stories. They felt the weight and they really embraced what the point was. And then people got to hear these stories and know how we can give back and how we can support. And the fundraiser is going directly to the people who wrote the letters. And what's so moving about storytelling is that it changes perspective. It puts you in the shoes of somebody else. It's like that whole walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Then you will be outside of your own bubble, your own experience. And I'm really proud of this nonprofit. We have a whole series planned for this summer. It's just storytelling is magical. You've told your story from the pulpit here, and it changed hearts, it changed minds, it changed perspectives. It opens up your mind outside of yourself. I love storytelling.
And I love that you're providing a safe space for people to share their stories, right?
It's so important for everyone to feel welcome to tell their story and not hide themselves, not hide who they are. It takes a certain amount of vulnerability to be able to tell some of the things that you probably have never said out loud. A lot of
people don't like to show the ugly sometimes.
Oh,
And people
man,
don't like to show
yeah.
the scary or the vulnerable, but it's so powerful, and I just wanted you to share that.
Oh, you're so sweet. Yes, I am very proud of this nonprofit. We've been working really hard, and we fell into this nonprofit. My goal in this career of mine, that's a mishmash career.
Yeah.
I didn't envision myself to be a co-founder of a nonprofit, but me and my friend Bo, we fell into this, and it's working, and it fits well, and both of us have this passion for storytelling. We come from a theater background. I'm a writer, she's a writer.
Wow.
It just fits. I'm also super organized and have all the checklists.
Oh, we haven't picked up on that at all.
The checklist and the organization and there's a system. There's
a system, Christi, on that. Thank you so much for joining us today, because it's important to see what's happening behind the scenes, and I consider you a valuable member of the leadership team here at St. Andrews.
Gosh.
I really do. I've appreciated our friendship, but I appreciate, honestly, even more the work that you do for our congregation and our community, and I look forward to seeing the many more things that you have for us.
I'm giving her a Taylor Swift hand heart.
I hand heart you back.
I can't do the finger heart the new millennials are doing. It's
the middle. Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. Just do the full hand. Yeah. Whatever.
Thank you, and more to come.
All right. Thanks, Sarah.